In this lesson I'm going to show you how to make this 4-claw round basket setting for a 7mm stone. Might look complicated, but it's very easy once you know how. I've used 1mm thick round wire, and the first thing to do is to make the jump ring that goes inside the setting. Now the wire I've got here is 8 centimeters long. That's going to make one setting with enough to put a stem on it as well. So bear that in mind if you're making a pair of earrings. Just double up on everything I'm doing from now on. I'm going to make the jump ring the quick easy way, which is just to wrap the silver around a stake. The stake size here, which is actually a handle of my needle file, is 3.5mm, so that will give me an outside diameter of 5.5mm for the jump ring. So if you're using a different size stone, then deduct 1.5mm off the size of the stone and make the jump ring that diameter. Now the metal I'm using is half hard, which means that if it was freshly annealed it'd be very bendy and it's going to make life a little bit difficult later on. So what I did was I annealed it just before I pulled it through the last hole in the draw plate, and that's just made it half hard so I can work it without it bending all over the show. If you're buying the metal, then make sure you ask for half hard metal. So I'll just clamp the end of the jump ring onto my stake or needle file handle, and then just wrap it around, keep it really tight, and then allow it to overlap. And then I have allowed for a little extra with the 8cm start, so it's okay to just lose a little bit. Cut right through. Of course, if you're making a pair, just wrap it around twice. Don't do one at a time, it just takes forever doing it that way. Close the joint up, get it nice and tight, and put it to one side. You're not going to solder it yet. It will be soldered onto the inside of the claw later on. My dividers are set at 9mm, so I'm just scratching off at 9mm. And then I'll scratch off again at 9mm. So I can now cut that, and that's going to make half the setting, 2 claws, once I've doubled them over. Do the same again, and that will make the other half. We've got all that left over for the stem. Now the stem of earring studs should be a little bit thinner than that. That's going to be quite uncomfortable for most ears, so bear that in mind. If you've got 0.9mm round wire for later on, then you can use that. Now I'm going to use you can use very fine round nose pliers like that. You can use flat to round pliers. I'm going to use these, and I'm going to use the very end, to get the bend nice and tight. So I'll just get the round nose part right on the mark that I just made and bend it over like so. Try and keep the claws the same length. There we go. And then I'm going to just check with my protractor, because I want that angle at 60 degrees, so that actually lines up straight away with 60. So the baseline runs along one of the claws there, the other claw runs up, and you can see it says 60 there. If anything, it was just needs to be opened a fraction. So now with the other one, do exactly the same. This time just match it up to the first one, make sure it corresponds, and We can set it up for soldering. Before I do that, I'll just rub a little bit of emery over where it will be joined together. That cleans it up, and that'll allow the flux to stick to it. To line them up, so the claws should be straight like that and like that, and got my hard solder, pop it on the joint. Just move it back into position if it comes away, and then allow the solder to run right through. I'm going to let that cool. I'm not going to flux it, pickle it, because I'm going to drill straight through there and put the stem on. This is a very small ball burr. It's 0.7. You don't have to use one exactly that size. You just need to be able to burr a little divot right in the middle there, and that will keep the drill steady. This drill is 0.9 of a mil, and if you're using 0.9 mil wire for your stem, then use a slightly smaller drill. So it's a very small area to drill through. So hopefully you've got the skills, the drilling skills, to do this. And if not, then there is a free drilling test that you can have a go at in the silver level apprentice course, and that will help you with your drilling skills. So I'm just wobbling the drill in there until the wire fits in, and we want the wire to fit in and hold itself in position whilst we solder it. Makes life a lot easier when you do that. I'm also going to flatten the top. And there we go. So what will happen is, that's flat there. We're going to lay it down and then solder from where the stem will come out. So we'll solder it from that side. So just flux the end of the wire and go to the solder mat, and a little bit of, I'm using hard solder again. You can use medium solder, and this kind of project, if you can keep things tight as you put them together like this, then you can get away with using just a butane torch or a gas only torch. You don't really need a mini torch as long as your solder skills are good. So that's the benefit of getting everything tight and friction fitting first. You're less reliant on your solder equipment. So heat it up, get that solder to run, and there we go. So the stem's now soldered to what will be the setting. I'll pickle that now. Now clean what will be the inside of the setting, and get your dividers and set them at 4.5 mil. So you need good precision dividers. Put one end of your dividers right in the centre, and then mark on the wires so you'll have your little marks on what will be the inside of the setting. And with a tapered burr or a physio burr, this is a 1 mil burr. I'm just going to put a little light notch on there. I'm not going to go too deep. It's just so we can see it when we form the setting. Okay, grip the claw nice and straight like that, and then bend it, keeping it nice and straight. Go over to the opposite one and do the same. So it's very easy to pull your claws out of whack if you're not careful. So again, put your pliers right along the claw like that. You could see I just pulled it over so it lines up better, and bend again. Hold on to the stem and bend it this way. Turn it over. And then bend it as close to the stem as you can. And last one, a little bit awkward getting hold of this one. I'll do it this way. Before I go any further, I can see that it's, when you line it up like that, you can see that it's kicking off one way. Look at the other two. Yeah, I need to just do a slight adjustment to those two. I'll just bend this up first, and now they need to be quartered properly. So the position of the 4 points there should be perfectly north, south, east, west. Okay. Now this one's kind of cracked a little bit at the bottom there. It will hold together. I just felt it weaken just a little bit there, so I'm going to be very careful. But if you use 0.9mm wire, then there'll be a bit more metal around at the bottom there, so it will hold together a lot easier. So now I'm just running the burr on the inside, going over those notches I put in earlier, making them a little bit deeper. And we're around about 1/3 into the metal. And here we go. Just make sure that it is perfectly lined up. We're going to put the jump ring in now. So I've got the joint there. I need to make sure that that lines up with one of the claws. So push it down the setting. Hopefully if you get it right, you should hear a bit of a click as it goes in now. Because it's not tight enough, I didn't get that. So I'm just going to pull the claws in a little bit. Okay, the joint's lined up, push it down. And just push the claws in a little bit to lock it into position. There we go. So now we'll line that up, ready for soldering. That should hold itself in position. Again, before we solder it, just going to make sure that those claws are lined up perfectly. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now flux the joints, and also I'm fluxing underneath where I just felt it weaken, so I'll just check the solder once I've got the jump ring soldered. Then it's going to hold itself together then. I've got some little bits of solder already cut. Now I'm using easy solder for this, as it will be the last joint. Okay, I'll just sweat the joint at the bottom there. There's enough solder there, so it just needs to rerun. There we go. So now I'll pickle that, I'll stick it in the tumbler, and then we'll look at setting the stone. I'm ready to set the stone now, and I've got the stone in. It's making contact with the inside of the claws. There's plenty of room under the stone for it to drop further down. I need to cut into the claws to put the seating cut in, so I need to put the cut at least 1 mil lower than where the girdle's coming to at the moment. So I'll just put a little notch around about 1 mil lower than the girdle is, and you'll just see it there. It's probably only slightly over 1 mil from the bezel, the jump ring bezel there. I'll show you the cuts. So I'm just again using the same burr as before, and we're going in crossways this way. It's a lot safer to do your seating cut using this burr. And we're going to cut into the thickness of the claws around about 1/3 of the way in. So if you want to be really cautious, then set your dividers and mark each seating point that you want to cut. Now there's several ways to do a claw setting like this. This is only one option for a burr. If you've seen my setting videos before, you'll see that I do use a heart burr quite a lot. So there's the notches, but this is a great way to show beginners because it's very safe. So when you're using a heart burr, you have to use it straight on so it lines up with the claw, and it's very easy for it to pick up traction and rip around the claw and cause damage. So it's very heartbreaking for a beginner, so that's why I like to show this way first. So as you can see, the stone is just about in, just needs a bit of a push. Here's my brass pusher. So that you can see that the girdle is in the seating cut of those two there, and not quite in there because the pavilion's catching on the jump ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a large ball burr and just countersink the jump ring. So I'm just taking off the top inside edge. And that will allow the stone to drop in a little bit further. There you go, that's really comfortably in there now, as you can see. So I'm going to use the side of my pliers. It can be any pliers, just to push the claws up, and that will lock the stone into position. Once you've got two claws bent upright like that, it locks the whole stone in. And the other two. There we go. That's nice and level as well. Those claws are very long, so I'll just snip them down. I use my end cutters to do that, and I'll just line it up with the table, so it will be straight across the table there, you can see. So I've just got the jaws of the snips, the cutters, just resting on the table as I do that, and that keeps them all the same length. Let's file them down a little bit. So avoid making contact with the stone. And the easiest way to finish off the claw tips is to use a cup burr. So this is a 2mm cup burr, and I can just roll it around the top like that, and that finishes it off, rounds it off, and makes it look really pretty. and also it shouldn't be catchy after that because you've rounded it off. And once I've done that, I'll give it a light polish, and we'll take a look. But before we do that, I will just finish off the stem. I'll show you a really good way of finishing the stem, because you really need to put a little stopper line just before the end of the stem. So I'll cut it off at 10mm. If you're not sure about the length, then always go a little bit longer. You can cut it down if need be. So that's around about 11mm right to that point there. And then around about 3mm down from the end, I'm going to put a very slight cut with my piercing saw, very slight, and then I'll put my end cutters in at that point, and then with hardly any pressure on the handle. If you put too much pressure on, you'll just cut through. So I've hardly got anything there, but you should be able to just roll the setting around, and then it should get smoother and smoother, and then you should have a really neat looking notch in the stem like that. So once you've done that, we can just round off the end with the cut burr, give it a polish, and we're done. And there we have it. Got the matching pair now. Hope you enjoyed.